You're listening to the Mile High Vineyard podcast. For more information about the Mile High Vineyard, go to milehighvineyard.org.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you? You guys doing good? What? What'd you say? Oh, wonderful. Oh, good. You guys are adding to that. It's good to be with you today. I agree. After our 20 people for first service, this is nice to have a little energy and people in the room. It's really good. So today we are wrapping up our series, as Corey said. I've really enjoyed it also. I think it's been really fantastic to go back to the very beginning part of Genesis, explore a little bit on what was the intended kind of purpose, actually, of creation. I'm going to be talking about something that is very near and dear to my heart, something that I feel like culturally might be one of the most difficult things to honor, to listen to. I feel like the thing that we're talking about today actually has great implications to our physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And we can't actually even talk about it enough. So with that said, I'm sure you're like, what is this? What is this? What is she going to talk about today? But let me go ahead and start off with a story. This came to mind actually as I was preparing this week that, when I was back in college, of course, it's such an exciting time, right, for a person. I don't know if you can think about if you did college yourself, but quite an exciting time, right? You sign up for your classes and you're thinking about what you want to do with life. And so I entered into college at Ohio State and then took on a job because, you got to have that little part-time job to make sure that you're paying the bills and that sort of thing. Figured out pretty quickly that didn't work, and so I added a second job. Still didn't have enough money. So added a third job. My aunt took pity on me, and I was like a nanny for her kids, So I took on a third job. Now, at the time that I was going to school, there was a lot of cool things that were happening in the church that we were involved in, and ministry and that sort of thing. So lots of ways to be able to serve and to be able to use my time, my talents, my energy. And what happened to me during that time of like an incredibly full experience, really pushed to the max margin, whatever experience, is that I remember very distinctly waking up every day feeling completely exhausted. From like the time that I got up to the time that I went to bed and collapsed with my head to the pillow, complete exhaustion. And it was so bad that my boyfriend, who's now my husband at the time, Jay, he came to me this one day, and he had saved his money to take me on this special experience to Phantom of the Opera. It had come to town, and he knew that I loved performances and orchestra, all of that sort of thing. And I remember I was so excited about the idea of it, but the practicality, like the day of, I remember waking up going, oh, there's no way I'm going to make it. I am not going to make this. I am not going to be present. This is awful. Because what was happening during that time is that every time I would sit down, I had like narcolepsy, like come on me. And every time I'd sit down, whether it be in class or at my aunt's house nannying or whatever, I would sit there and I would just like take these naps like all the time. I was like constantly sleeping. And but it was just because I wasn't resting well at night and I was just so busy during the day. I'd sit in the car, I'd fall asleep, if I was passenger, fall asleep, and it was just crazy. So the big day comes, Phantom of the Opera, and as you can ascertain, I fell asleep right in the middle of the performance. He's elbowing me the entire time, come on, wake up, this is the part, and pay attention, And I will never forget this severe look of disappointment in his face when we were all done. And he's like, what did you think? And I'm going, it was good. It was really good. It was just one of those things where I'm like, I think it was good. Because I missed half of it because I've been living at such a pace where I couldn't be present. I couldn't even stay awake, actually, for something really beautiful, a gift that somebody had given to me. And you guys, I would love to say that was like the only time in my life things changed and whatnot, but I look back and I'm like, okay, this has happened so many different times in my life. Every different stage that I enter into, starting a family, taking on more responsibilities at work, planning for events, different stages of life where my kids get older, there needs to be a constant evaluation, actually, in my own life. For me, there's been a constant evaluation on, are things working or not? Am I actually living life out of the overflow of what's happening? Do I have reservoirs of energy, or am I so depleted that I cannot be present for the things that are happening around me? So today, this morning, we're going to wrap up this series by talking about a commandment that was given in Genesis 2, followed up all the way throughout the scriptures. I mean, we're talking, it's followed up in Exodus, it's followed up in Numbers, it's followed up in the Psalms, it's followed up with Jesus, it's followed up all the way to Hebrews. It is about the Sabbath and how we as the people of God should be having regular moments of honoring a Sabbath day. Now, I don't know what you're thinking when I say that. Are you thinking, okay, I do this well. I don't need this, Because I would bet that most of us, if we had to get really honest, we don't do this very well. We don't do this very well. We don't know how to rest because we live in a culture where this is not taught, where if anything, we've got amazing pressure and a tidal wave coming against us, speaking to us that there is no time to slow down. There's no time that we have to produce more, and we have to do more, and we have to be more, and we have to commit more. We've got emails flying at us, and work responsibilities, and young children, and whatever it is that you have going on. So the thought of actually entertaining Sabbath might be kind of tricky for some of us. We might have a little bit of resistance. And my prayer, my hope this morning would be that we actually could meet that resistance and that God would awaken imagination inside of us. That he would awaken imagination, that there could be something that could shift and change today, going, I think that I maybe could. I think that maybe I could start here. I think that maybe the framework has been built to where I actually understand why and how important this actually is and why it was ordained from the very beginning of time. So let's go ahead and talk about this. We're going to talk about basically what is Sabbath, why is it so important, and then I'm just going to get nitty-gritty practical. Because honestly, we can stay in the clouds all day long, but unless we actually really think about the practical implications of Sabbath, it actually really doesn't work. And so my heart would be that we all could walk out of this space today with one next step. One next step, one conversation that we need to have, one practice that we want to try, one way that we want to adjust our schedules and make this super practical so that we can even come back next week going, okay, I tried it on. I don't know how it works, but I tried it on. These are kind of the places where I'm stuck, or these are the places that I want to celebrate. So what is Sabbath? Let's go ahead and start here. What is Sabbath? How do we define Sabbath? What is the definition of Sabbath? Let's go ahead and look at Exodus 20, 8 through 11, because Sabbath was ordained in Genesis 2. It was designed in Genesis 2. Exodus references it because it was actually specifically named in the Ten Commandments. If you haven't read the Ten Commandments in a while, it's commandment number 4, and this is what it says. It says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God, and on it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant, maidservant, your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So what is Sabbath? It's a day of rest. It says very clearly, it is a day of rest where we actually stop working. Where we stop working with all the demands that are on us, the job responsibilities that never seem to end. There is a real rest that should be happening on a Sabbath. Now, I don't know about you, but this could mean, I think it's more than just a physical rest. I don't know what you're thinking about right now, but physical rest is incredibly important on a Sabbath. We run to the edges of our energy, of our abilities. We don't sleep well as a culture. All the cultural studies right now are saying we don't take care of our bodies. We don't take care of our bodies. We don't sleep the proper amounts of time. Our sleep is interrupted or it's not very deep. And so oftentimes the thought of rest, the thought of physical rest can be rather daunting, right? It can be rather daunting. It can be like, okay, I don't know how this is supposed to go. I live on caffeine all the way throughout my day, and then when it comes to night, I take things to be able to go to sleep. You see, this is something, obviously we can talk about it forever, but this is something that's very real to people. Physical rest is something that we were designed to be able to have and to be able to make happen in our lives. Now, if that's something that you do struggle with, then that's something that maybe that's where you start here for Sabbath. Because when we put away all the production, when we put away all the work kind of responsibilities, when we say, listen, our day right here is actually to rejuvenate in very physical ways, in very emotional ways, in very spiritual ways, we have to actually start with the physical. We have to figure out what's going on. A couple years ago, I was really working on this. It was a different stage of my life where I realized I was kind of working a lot more out of exhaustion. Everything felt very effort-filled. And I was taking a little bit of time, and I remember sitting in the doctor's office he's like, tell me everything that's going on. And you don't realize until those moments, the things that you just kind of live with, until you have somebody compassionately looking in front of you going, okay, tell me what's going on, I'm like, well, this isn't, and then I get to the sleep part, and I'm like, I think I've lived this way for so long, waking up multiple times a night. Parents, are you hearing me? Little ones, yes. Waking up, it affects you in the morning, not being able to get those deep sleeps, being able to push through any moments of tiredness in a day because you just have to keep going. And this doctor looked at me and he said, okay, this isn't normal. Let's work on this. And this will take a long time. Let's look at the levels of adrenals. Let's look at the ways that you have pushed through with stress. Let's start from the very bottom and try to figure this out. That might be you today. That might be you. Where Sabbath will force you to look at your physical body and the way that you sleep and the way that you physically restore. Now, there's something that makes me very aware as a pastor when I talk to anybody that actually says to me in kind of a proud way, kind of like a boastful way, like, well, I just don't even need sleep. I'm driven, or I don't need to slow down. I don't need, more than, 5 hours of sleep at night. I can stack my schedule. And there's a boastfulness. We've all known people like that. Maybe that's been you, I don't know. But there's a boastfulness about it because there's something culturally that's happening where we praise people for being able to push to the edges of who they are, who they've been designed to be. We praise, we acknowledge, we want to give them awards and be able to talk about them and write articles about them and put them on news programs because they seem like larger than life. And it says from the very beginning of time that we were never meant to do that. So it's not only a day of rest, but as Eugene Peterson would say, if you guys have enjoyed him as a writer, he would also say that it's a day of playing and praying. It's a day where we're not only just physically resting our bodies and our minds and our hearts, but we're actually investing in life-giving, joyful things. Now, if I asked you right now, what brings you life? What brings you joy to where you walk away from that experience and you walk away from whatever investment that you made in a person or whatever, and do you know that feeling of like, I feel good. I feel like that gave me energy. I feel like I'm a better person for participating in that or for being across from that human being. Do you know that feeling? Have you ever had that feeling before? Maybe you exercise or you're creative and you participate in something and you're like, that gave me life from the inside out. That's what I'm talking about here. Sabbath should be activity-oriented. If you are going to participate in activity that's not work-oriented to where you're producing and getting something done, but yet you're being filled with life and you're being restored and your energy is coming back. So what is that for you? What is that? There's a book that blew me out of the water a couple years ago when I read it. It was really one of the most life-changing things. I don't know if any of you guys are readers. It's called Sabbath is Resistance. It's Walter Brueggemann. It's one of those reads, like where you read like a page at a time, and you're like, oh my God, you shut it, and you're like, oh, that kind of messed with me. Like, I've never thought that thought before. Like, it was just a really, really, really good book. So Sabbath is Resistance. And the whole idea of this book, if you wanted to kind of explore it a little bit more, it'd be a little bit more of what I'm talking about. Excuse me. But the whole idea of the book is that, again, we live in a culture that does not allow time for the things that I'm talking about. Rest, playing, having those simple practices of just connecting with God, going, God, how are you doing? How am I doing? Like, let me check in and see how things are. We live in a culture that's push, 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 push. And so the title of the book, Sabbath is Resistance. What's the resistance part? It's the people of God standing there going, this is not the way that I want to live. This is not the way that I want to live. I'm giving the worst of who I am to the best people around me. I am incapable of saying no because I'm people-pleasing and I'm trying to honor all the different things that are happening around me. I get excited and I say yes, and then I think about it later and then think I should have said no. You see, it's a resistance going, there's got to be a better way to live, a place that is more peaceful and less anxious than all the other people that I'm surrounded by. You see, that's the resistance. That's the resistance. And because we are being called to be a people that are resisting this cultural kind of push that is so forceful, it means that, well, honestly, people are going to be upset with us. They're going to be upset. We're going to disappoint people around us. We're going to have people look at us and try to make us do something that we know in our heart of hearts that it would cost us, and it would cost our families, and it's not worth it. Because when we give away those precious spaces, when our energy is being restored, when we give away those precious spaces, boy, we do everything a disservice. We do everything around us a disservice when we give away those precious things, right? For the sake of, honestly, nothing. So Sabbath resistance, I mean, that's the challenge for all of us today. So what do you do? What do you participate in that brings you joy in life? What is that? Maybe that's the question that we kind of simmer on and you take away today, like, oh my God, I haven't thought about that actually in a really long time. Is it a nice little walk around the block where you don't have to get anywhere? You just kind of look around, you look at the houses, I mean, you look at the outside, you're going to a park, you're going into the mountains. Is it a nice glass of wine with a friend? Good conversation, does that fill you with life? Is it reading for pleasure? Is it watching movies to where there's like a story that just really intrigues you? And you get outside of your own story for a little bit. Is it a date with your spouse? Is it time with your kids? Is it playing with your animals? Is it, investing in the creative? Making space for the things that light you up and bring you life? What is that for you? Is it working with your hands? Is it digging in your yard? Do you have that actually in your schedule right now? Or is it something that you just keep putting off and putting off and putting off, going maybe one day or when I have time, because you will never have the time to be able to do it? So what is Sabbath? Sabbath is rest, it's playing, it's praying, it's connecting with God. But why is it so important? It's so important because there are deep, deep, deep realities actually that we recognize in the midst of honoring Sabbath. So even if you set aside the time and the space and you've looked at your Google Calendar and this is your Sabbath, your Saturday or Friday or whatever it may be, there actually are deep realities that start to stir from the inside out, and they start to stir and they come forth. And there's a couple things that we have to remember why Sabbath is so important and why God would ordain it from the very beginning of time, why it's so important. We remember that we are finite human beings. We remember the ultimate order of creation. We are finite. No matter how much you want to believe that and argue with me right now, how much you think that you are a superhero and that you can go and go and go and you can eat whatever you want and drink whatever you want and have as much people interaction as you want, we were never designed to be able to go and go and go and go. I'm going to go ahead and just read to you real quick. There is it's actually just a beautiful little portion of the book that I recommended to you a minute ago, Sabbath is Resistance. This is what the author says. It says, thus the Sabbath command of Exodus 20 recalls that God rested on the seventh day of creation, an allusion to Genesis 2. That divine rest on the seventh day of creation has made clear that Yahweh is not a workaholic. letter B, that Yahweh is not anxious about the full functioning of creation. C, that the well-being of creation does not depend on endless work. This performance and exhibit of divine rest thus characterizes the God of creation itself, and the creatures made in this image. We are made in the image of a resting God. Creation is to be enacted and embraced without defining anxiety. Indeed, such divine rest serves to delegitimate and dismantle the endless restlessness sanctioned by all the gods in this culture. That divine rest on the seventh day, moreover, is recalled in the commandment of Exodus, wherein God is refreshed on the seventh day. The God of Israel and of all creation is no immovable fixed object, but here is said to be depleted, and by rest may recover a full sense of self. You see, it's when we rest and when we Sabbath that we recognize we have limits, that we regularly want to push those limits, that our bodies were not created to be able to do that, and we regain a sense of who we are in the midst of Sabbath. You see, the picture that really helps me is actually trying to imagine, excuse me, sorry, I'm getting over bronchitis. This is an interesting picture. I actually think of it almost as like reservoirs in all of us. We have deep reservoirs inside of who we are, inside of our souls, our bodies. Energy fills those reservoirs, right? And so when we give and give and give and give, we get so depleted of energy. The practice of disengagement from all of our responsibilities, from all that culture tells us we need to do, from the things that we commit to. Appropriate disengagement from that, right? Appropriate disengagement from that. When we disengage from that, and we recognize and we take stock of like, okay, this is where I am at. This is where my reservoir is at. This is where my energy is at. Recognizing what is it that I can do to actually refill and restore, what is it the Lord can do, what is it that I can do, and then being able to re-engage after a period of disengagement is so critically important. It makes us more present, more aware of what God is calling us to be able to do, our mission on this earth. I mean, there's studies upon studies upon studies saying that it doesn't matter if you are a professional, an athlete, an artist, a creative, a mom, a dad. We have to have regular moments of disengagement. Disengagement where we say, no, I'm going to pause for a moment for the sake of my health and my life. I'm going to restore and actually consider what that means before I re-engage and bring everything that I have to the world. The best of who I am, everything that God is actually calling me to be able to do, and we are so much more potent. We are so much more potent when we bring the best of who we are after we have been restored. So, we not only remember creation, our finiteness, okay, is that even a word? I don't even know. Our finiteness, we also remember freedom. On Sabbath days, weekly Sabbath days, and I would actually encourage you that even those daily moments actually prepare you actually for a weekly Sabbath. Those 15 minutes of just kind of slowing, breathing, hearing God every day, getting your heart right, actually prepare. It's like a training actually for the seventh day. But we remember freedom. And without actually talking too much, I just want to read the scriptures in Deuteronomy 5. It specifically talks about this. It says, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy as the Lord your God has commanded you to be able to do. 6 days you shall labor, do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. So again, everything that we've been talking about today. Let's skip ahead to verse 15. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of here with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. You see, when everything broke down in Genesis 3, when everything broke down and the intended order of the universe broke down, what happened is that we've, as human beings, found ourselves entrenched in slavery, entrenched in being able to work and to produce and to be able to find our identity by what we actually do. So you can see in Exodus, you can see the Israelites, they were taken over by the Egyptians. They were beaten. They were actually, they had huge kind of orders for, making bricks. They never had rest And it embedded itself in their way of living and thinking that they never could stop. And so what we see here in Exodus is the permission from God, the freedom from God saying, you are not meant to do this, and I will rescue you from it. That work is good for a moment, and you must learn how to rest. Because what happens in the beauty of remembering our freedom is that we get things right with God. We get things right. It's the identity piece, right? We're not who we are by our work. Our identity that is formed by what we do and produce and the things that we get paid for, or maybe not paid for, right? That identity actually does not work on day 7 because God doesn't care about it. He just doesn't. He doesn't. He doesn't look at you and go, okay, prove yourself to me. Produce more for me. I will show you how much I love you by you showing me how many bricks you make, right? It's in those moments of quietness on our Sabbath, quietness where we ask God, okay, God, who do you see me to be? Anything that kind of went off the grid, anything that went off astray, let's go ahead and fix it. Let's go ahead and pay attention to it. See, there's deep agreements with God, and we see this actually in another portion of Scripture, Ezekiel 20, and I just want to actually read the last little part because basically it says, starting in verse 13, it says, listen, when you disobey this, there's deep, deep, deep consequences. There's deep consequences not only for your own life, but for the people around you. And it talks about the Lord working in grace with people, going, I should be punishing you for this because I've said this so clearly over and over and over again that this is such an important commandment. I should be punishing it. I will actually extend grace for you, but you don't get why Sabbath is so important. Sabbath is so important because if we look at verse, 17. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead, Jerry. Yet I looked on them with pity and did not destroy them and put an end to them in the desert. I said to their children in the desert, do not follow the statutes of your fathers or keep their laws or defile yourselves with their idols. I am the Lord your God. Follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. Keep my Sabbaths holy, that they could be a sign between us. Then you will know that I'm the Lord your God. You see, on Sabbath, we get small, God gets big. Do you hear that? We get small, God gets big. We live the other days thinking that we're big and God's small. It's such a beautiful agreement before the Lord where he goes, listen, we've got something good going on. We can't forget it. We have something really deep and meaningful going on. I whisper to you like who I have made you to be, the plans that I have for you. I keep things on track for Sabbath. And when you neglect and you ignore it, you forget. Those are good words, right? It's Ezekiel. So let me go ahead and get practical here, okay? And we're going to go ahead and wrap up this week. Let's get practical. Because if we don't get practical, okay, I mean, we can come out of here thinking, oh yeah, that's good, that's good. I have absolutely no idea how to actually do that because my life is too busy. It's too crazy. I got little kids. I mean, the sense of kind of excuse making that can come up in a moment like this. But my life, ... I do it all the time. You want to kind of excuse yourself, right? I'm going to go ahead and challenge us that this is for everybody. This is for everybody. Whether you look at your schedule and you just think, okay, I'm going to try a whole day. Maybe start with 4 hours. Maybe start with 8 hours. Maybe you just try and go for the big shebang. What God has actually commanded you to do, go for the whole day, okay? But these are a few very practical things that I've actually seen in my own life that really help that I want to remind you. Sabbaths have to be scheduled. They just have to be scheduled. I don't know if you guys are schedulers, not schedulers. This is so worth scheduling. I can't even explain it. It is so worth scheduling. Getting out your calendar, looking at your time, looking at your day, when you absolutely have to miss, making up for it in another way in your week. But they have to be scheduled. Because oftentimes we pay attention to our schedule and honor appointments that for other people, and we forget that when it comes to our own life and heart, that this might be the most important thing that we can put in our life, the most important appointment. So Sabbaths have to be scheduled, but yet there has to be a little bit of a prep for Sabbath. I mean, Sabbaths you just don't kind of wander into a Sabbath and just expect that it's going to be magical. You're going to hear the Lord. You're going to like rest completely. And I mean, there has to be a little bit of prep. It's the same thing as when we talk to couples in the church and marriage ministry. I mean, we'll talk about, guys, dates, super important, super, super important. Connect with your spouse, have fun, laugh, whatever. So many couples want to hold the family meeting where they're talking about schedules and money and that sort of thing, hold it during the date because there's been no separate kind of clarification that there needs to be two separate spaces for that. So, I mean, haven't we all sat in the restaurant, we're arguing over money and we're supposed to be having a date, like we just get all confused by it. It's supposed to be separate. You take care of business in one meeting and then you go and enjoy your spouse in the second. It's the same with Sabbath. You have to have a little prep. You might prep your food. You might prep your, just make sure that, you clean your schedule out. You might actually put some of those life-giving activities in there. You might actually do a little bit of chores so that you're not doing chores on your Sabbath. And that's another thing that I want to say is chores will always be tempting. You will always look at your pile of laundry that looks like Mount Vesuvius or something. I don't even know. I mean, like the piles of laundry and just go, when is this supposed to get done? When, the other day I had a mouse run across my kitchen. When am I supposed to take care of mices, or mouses. Mouses. When am I supposed to take care of that, right? Like, what am I supposed to do? Just add that to my list of chores that I'm supposed to do, right? The lawn needs to be mowed. The fences need to be fixed. That is separate from what I'm talking about. It's so important, but it's separate, and you will always be tempted to do chores. Curating technology and media, I wish that I had an hour to talk about media. I really do. The best piece of advice that I could give you is that you are in control of your own technology. It does not control you. You control it. There are off buttons on your technology. Parents, as you talk with your children, I've got preteens and teens, as you talk with your kids, this might be one of the most important things that you're talking about with them, that there needs to be limits to technology. When I say the word curate, I think it's such a beautiful word because we carefully choose what we consume. So 8 hours of Netflix, you guys, 8 hours of Netflix on your show that you're just into might not fill you in the restful ways that I'm actually talking about. It just might not. It might just be like numbing, like I'm done, I'm tired. Could we be a people of God that just carefully curate how much we're consuming? That there's moments where we turn off the computer, we turn off the iPads, that we put limits on it, we have kids come out of their bedrooms, and we actually try to figure out what it's like to actually eat together and talk together. So last couple things, choose some life-giving activities, I already mentioned that, and then cultivate Thanksgiving. This is something beautiful. Somebody just recently told me about this, that this was such an important practice in their Sabbath, where they looked at the previous 6 days and they just said, God, where were you? Where were you? Thank you, God. Thank you for all the ways that you showed yourself to me and you spoke to me, because oftentimes when we're in the midst of it, we can't see. We can't see where God is. And to cultivate celebration and thankfulness and gratitude, what a beautiful practice. And that could be 5 minutes, that could be half an hour on a Sabbath, but it's such a beautiful practice. Okay. I think we're done. I think that's all that I'm going to do. If you guys want to keep talking about this, I think this is such a great space for small groups to keep talking about this, especially in your different stages of life, our moms, our dads, older kids, grandparents, that sort of thing. I mean, we all have different unique things that we're dealing with. So let's go ahead and stand right here, and then we're going to go ahead and respond.
Thank you for listening to the Mile High Vineyard podcast. We would like to encourage you to respond to what you just heard by filling out a Connect card and sharing a prayer request with us. As a staff, we pray over those each week and would love a chance to connect and pray for you. To do that, please go to milehighvineyard.org/connect. You can also respond by being generous, as God has been generous to you. You can do that by giving online at milehighvineyard.org/give. We hope to hear from you soon. Thanks again for listening.